OneLitPodcast may contain adult language or sensitive subject matter. Please take care while listening.
Hello, everyone. It's Andrea,
Hayden,
and Olivia,
and welcome to OneLitPodcast. Woo! I will be your host for this next novel, and I'm so excited to start a new book. For the next month or 3 weeks or so, we will be going over The Moonflowers by Abigail Rose-Marie. So that's exciting.
Yeah. Any initial thoughts on how the novel's going so far?
Well, I was going to go into a little bit about the author.
Go right ahead.
And then I'm going to give a brief synopsis of the books in case there's some people that are just wanting to listen to us spoil the book. Okay, so Abigail Rose-Marie is a writer from Grand Rapids, Michigan. She holds a PhD in creative writing from Ohio University and a Master of Fine Arts from Bowling Green State University. She currently lives with her wife and their very spoiled pets in Utah. The Moonflowers is her first novel.
Ooh.
And then a brief synopsis of the book. Tig Costello has arrived in Darren, Kentucky, commissioned to paint a portrait honoring her grandfather Benjamin. His contributions to the rural Appalachian town and his unimpeachable war service have made him a local hero. But to Tig, he's a relative stranger. To find out more about him, Tig wants to talk to the person who knew her grandfather best, Eloise Price, the woman who murdered him 50 years ago. Still confined to a state institution, Eloise has a lifetime of stories to tell. She agrees to share them all about herself, about Tig's enigmatic grandmother, and about the other brave and desperate women who passed through Benjamin's orbit. Most revealing of all is the truth about Whitmore Halls, the mansion on the hill that was home to triage, rescue, death, and one inevitable day that changed Eloise's life forever. As Tig begins to piece together the puzzle of her mysterious family tree, it sends her spiraling toward a confrontation with her own painful past and a reconciliation with all its heart-rending secrets.
I did not read the back of this book. I just started it, so I knew nothing that was going to happen as we were going. Like I didn't.
So that's good.
Yeah, it was always surprised me. I kind of like getting a recommendation and not reading the back and just figuring it out as I go.
Honestly, I don't think I read the back either, except for that part that she's commissioned to do this portrait, and there's like some kind of mystery behind it.
I went into it blind, and it was a good experience.
That's good.
Yeah.
Good. I'm glad we're enjoying it so far. Because this was my pick. So if you hated it, I would feel really bad about it. But yeah, this sounds very interesting. What really made me pick it was that it takes place in Kentucky, which is where we are from. If you aren't aware, and you cannot tell by her accents, maybe you can when we're like excited and a little tipsy and that accent comes out. But yeah, we are from Kentucky.
Yeah.
And yeah, so before we dig in, what is everyone drinking this week?
So I brought the wine tonight, and we are having a Moscato d'Asti by Cupcake Vineyards.
It's really sweet.
I know, I like it.
Yeah.
I like sweet wine.
Oh, I did you?
So that's what everyone's drinking tonight.
Cupcake is affordable.
We've been busy, so we didn't have a chance to go out and make a run.
Yeah, I just got back from a long trip to Texas, and I came back on a late night flight. Didn't get in bed till 3:30 on Monday morning, and then had to go to work the next day. So
It's been a long couple days.
But it's all right.
Read all this on the plane. And yeah. Okay. Are we ready to get started?
Let's
I'm
go.
ready.
Okay. So everyone grab a drink, snuggle up in a cozy corner, and get ready to get lit. Okay. So we fibbed a little bit. We said we were going to read chapters 1 through 10. We read chapters 1 through 9. Apologies in advance if you're a chapter ahead of us. But save it for next week, and I appreciate you being prepared. Okay, so the book opens up with a prologue of Eloise speaking. And it starts off very abrupt. We find out that Benjamin Costello died by poisoning at the age of 28. So she's in jail for 50 years until the penitentiary becomes so full that they move her to an old asylum that's been converted to care for geriatric patients. So she cannot see anything. She cannot see the town from her window, but she has gotten a brochure about this sculpture about Benjamin Costello. And in that brochure, it tells you all the wonderful things he did for the town of Darren. But she leaves us with, is wonderful as the town says he is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really like the last line. It says, all the while, Benjamin stares straight ahead, never looking down at those who writhe beneath him. Mm-hmm. And it's just like, oh, man.
That was such a good line.
Like, ooh, everyone thinks he's a good guy, but maybe not. So, yeah, I like how it sets us up for that.
So, very quick prologue, and then we enter chapter 1. So, automatically I'm going to go ahead and preface this. There are a lot of flashbacks. So we'll be in the present one moment. We will be in the past another, in like the same paragraph. So bear with me. So it opens up. Antigone, known as Tig, travels to Darren and has a flashback of her conversation with her father in Ann Arbor, Michigan. While they're there, her father receives a letter from the mayor of Darren, Kentucky, basically asking him to contribute to their memoriam of this great man, Benjamin Costello, his dad. They want to commemorate a portrait. And they offer him to do this for $500. They're giving him a place to stay for several months. But he just kind of looks at it and he's like, not interested. He puts it down. And Tig is like, why aren't you interested in this? Like, you're a huge history buff. Don't you want to know about your family? Like, or do you want to go back to your hometown? And he's just like, no, not really. He's like, I didn't know these people. I didn't know my dad. Because we find out he was born like 3 months later.
Yeah, after
his mom leaves. So Tig is trying to convince him to take this gig. He's like, I really just don't want to, but maybe it'd be a good idea for you to go. And Tig is kind of like, why would I go? And he's like, I think it'd be basically good for you to get out of the house after what happened in Chicago. So
at this point, we don't know what happened in Chicago.
Yeah.
Not exactly right.
We have flashbacks.
Yeah, she mentions that she remembers her arms and legs being cut up when she arises from the alley in Chicago. But nothing has been explicitly said what happens.
Yeah. I feel like, just from the flashbacks, I feel like she was definitely assaulted.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
In a way, but we don't really know 100% sure how yet.
Right.
So we're just like, in my mind, I'm like, was it just like a mugging? Or like, was it like a sexual assault? Like, we don't know yet.
We don't know
at this point.
She just had to get out of Chicago.
Yes.
To Ann Arbor, Michigan.
So like her dad like asked her if she wants to do it because it does say like she was in an art program in Chicago, but she ends up dropping out like after all of this stuff in Chicago happened. So that's why now she's the one who's going to be going. Also, her dad is a medieval art professor.
That's a really cool niche job.
Very cool. Very, very cool.
Well, I think he's retired. I think it says he's retired now, but he at least was. And I'm just like, that's so crazy.
I don't know how you can't be into medieval art. There's something about it. It's super cool.
Yeah, and my Kindle's loading. But there is a cool quote where he talks about, where Tig mentions that he prefers the history of objects over the history of people.
Yeah.
They're really not up his,
Allie.
his So yeah. So she thinks about it and ultimately says, okay, I'll go.
Oh, there was this weird thing that happens in chapter 1 that I wanted to ask about.
Okay.
So they're having this whole thing about, like, you should go. And he's like, I don't want to go. And she mentions the nursery rhyme, Hey Diddle Diddle.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, where did that come from? Because it says, Hey diddle diddle, the cat and the fiddle, the cow jumped over the moon. The old nursery rhyme scratched against the inside of my ear and I cringed. It was the same aggravating tune that had plagued me ever since I left Chicago. And I'm just like, how is this going to tie back? I feel like it's just really odd.
Yeah, okay.
Like, especially in the middle, like, it's just in the middle of their conversation of, like, them trying to figure out, like, all right, who's actually going to Darren to, like, paint this portrait?
Right.
So I'm curious to see, like, how and if it's going to come up again later in the story.
And which, I mean, now that you mention that, later Eloise does say something about what, ashes, we all fall down or something like that.
Oh, does she?
Later.
Nursery rhymes
Yeah.
seem to be repeating.
So there's a nursery rhyme possible theme. Anyway, so she's like, okay, I'll go. But they literally don't tell anybody that the dad is not coming. So
Yeah.
she just shows up and the guy named Jason is just waiting to pick up a Mr. Costello, and there's this woman there. So, and of course, I just want to say that because Tig is a painter, her descriptions of Darren are really beautiful. Like, she's traveling on a train and she sees the trees, and it's fall, so they're all orange and red. And if
The
you
hills look like they're burning, she says.
Mhm. If you haven't been to Kentucky, our falls are really beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And it does look like trees are on fire.
A pretty fire.
A pretty fire. It's not a real fire. So that's where we leave off in chapter 1, and then chapter 2, we're in another flashback. Tig is thinking about this portrait she drew that was inspired by a photo of her grandmother standing in a river. And something in her just triggers, and she's thinking of her assault, which we now find out was a sexual assault. Because it says, like, he unbuckled his pants and asked her if she wanted this, and he didn't wait for her to answer. And so thinking about this, her rage just kind of takes over, and she destroys this portrait. She takes her keys and she scratches the arms and the legs of the lady. So kind of like she said in chapter 1, like, her arms and legs were cut up. And this portrait's pretty much destroyed. So then we're back in the present. Jason is driving her. They go past Whitmore Falls, and he explains that's where Eloise and her family lived. It's all overgrown, boarded up, but it is still standing tall. Jason makes the comment that his dad believes that evil is in that house, but it can only be contained for so long until it leaks out. So they're passing through town. All over the town there are, like, banners of war vets from World War I and II. They've been up there for a long time. So then Jason's like, I have to stop at this store. So he goes in, leaves Tig in the car, and Tig is looking around at her surroundings, and she sees these men just staring at her, and she's feeling very anxious and uncomfortable, which comes up quite a bit in these first 9 chapters, when just people are staring at her and she just wants to, like, curl in on herself.
Yeah, because she went through something traumatic.
Right, yeah. Especially, I feel like, yeah, it's definitely worse when there's men looking at her.
Yeah.
So after this stop at the general store, they go, Jason takes Tig to where she's going to be staying. and that is above the soap and spool shop. And May is the owner.
This is where we meet May, and
Yes.
I still don't know how I feel about her.
May is interesting.
A more so heavy-set woman, very stuck in her
She's very-
ways.
She gives Tig a lot of warnings here when they first meet. So Tig is just trying to be nice. Jason's left. She says, he seems like a nice guy. And May tells her, like, hey, everyone's nice until they're not. And he's, like, close with the mayor, so you should tread lightly.
She seems very weary of the mayor.
Yes, because she also makes that comment that the mayor told her that her dad was going to be staying there, and she didn't argue because no one argues with the mayor.
argues with the mayor. Mm-hmm.
And also, do we know how old the mayor is? I kind of pictured him as a younger guy.
I think he's kind of young.
I don't think it gave an actual description of him, but
Well,
super old.
I don't know because he said
He was a child
when
Benjamin
Ben died.
died. Yeah,
And that was at least 50 years ago.
okay, so he isn't.
Gotta be, he's gotta be like in his 50s, like mid to late 50s, I'd say.
Okay. Because
That makes
as we were
sense.
reading, I sort of pictured him as a younger guy.
Yeah, I did too, but then I was like, wait, no.
Can't-
He can't be super young.
Yeah. Another thing that May says whenever, she's Tig is like, they're talking about Jason, and she's like, oh, he's nice, and May's like, well, he's married. So don't get involved. So and
She's like, I'm on.
but like she keeps making comments about like, oh, women cause trouble.
Yeah,
and women
yeah,
attracting attention cause trouble. So I'm like, oh my
Right.
gosh,
So-
are you like sex?
That rolls into the next part.
Yes, she is.
Where she's like, I only have 3 rules for you. And the 3 rules were 1, not to come in odd hours of the night because she's a light sleeper. 2, when the shop is closed, the shop is closed. No visitors allowed, no exceptions. And then 3 was no attracting attention. A woman attracting attention is trouble.
Mhm.
And she doesn't want trouble. And then I think she said something about her being a city girl. I don't want any trouble here.
Yeah, one of the lines that I liked is Tig says, part of me wants to ask what it is about me that screams,
Yeah.
sex crazed homewrecker.
Yeah.
That
was good.
Yeah, like what?
I did like that. Yeah, that was funny.
Like judging a book by its cover.
Yeah.
Jeez.
She's starting to understand that she may not have as much of a peaceful time as she had imagined.
Right.
Yeah.
So May is showing her room where she's going to stay, and she tells May that she's going to go visit the statue, and she's like, that would be a good start. But before she goes, she looks out her window, and in the distance she sees a building, and she's doing this thing. I highlighted it, and it was a really good quote. It's just really long. Where she's getting really up close to the screen, which is full of little squares, right? So she's like got the little building in the square, and she's making a reference to cubism.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And here's a nice little line there, but my Kindle's going really slow.
Would you like me to read it?
Do you have it?
Where cubism is a distortion of reality?
Yeah.
Cubism is a distortion of reality. I learned this in a second-year art seminar focusing on the avant-garde movement in the early 20th century. You can never be certain about what you see. There is always something more happening underneath, in the soil just beneath the surface.
Yes. So I think, especially after reading these chapters 1 through 9, that's very telling, because there's more to meet the eye.
Absolutely.
There's going to be hidden stuff that we're digging up here.
And now we move on to chapter 3.
Yes, where Tig goes and visits the statue. And she makes a comment that the statue seems very out of place for this small country town. It's, bronze,
Mm-hmm.
Large,
very heavy,
bronze.
domineering presence. He's
Yes.
holding a musket.
Yeah, in this small town. Pretty much in the middle of this small town.
Yes, but it's while she's looking at this is where we meet the mayor. The mayor comes up and he's like, "Isn't this the best thing you've ever seen?"
Well, I mean, you have to think, like, in a small town like that, I mean, that's literally basically the only thing that town is probably known for.
It is, yeah.
So, yeah, like, no wonder
So he's excited.
Such a big thing.
So he's like, "Yep, so your dad sent you instead. Are you a painter?" Which was like, I would hope that would be obvious if she was coming.
No.
I'm not a painter at all. I'm just collecting that $500 and staying in this room above this lady's house. But as he asks this is when she says, "I dropped out of my classes," in her head. She's like, "I told him I was not coming back to my art classes after what happened in Chicago." And then the mayor tells her, like, this is just part of it. There's this whole museum. It's a plantation house, of course, called the Costello House. And he's just, everyone in this town is obsessed with this man. So the mayor gives her a little box. And he's like, "This belonged to Benjamin." Or this has things about Benjamin in it. There are items that belong to Benjamin, and then there are articles about Benjamin. And she makes this nice little comment that she says the box feels weightless and ruinous. But that was interesting.
So there's not a lot going on inside the box.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, we find out that there's, like, hardly anything.
There's hardly anything. There's, like, a pipe, I think, and the articles are
just some clippings, yeah.
Which the mayor does say that, like, he was a private person.
Yeah, he didn't.
Yeah, it seems like they themselves don't actually have a lot of knowledge about Benjamin.
Yeah.
They each have, like, little stories of encounters with him.
Right.
He was very
So
private.
the mayor even says everything they know about this man has been passed on. They truly know nothing about him. It's just been passed on to believe he's a good man.
Yes.
Because that's what's been told for the generation. He mentions that he's talking about the murder, and he's like, "No, don't worry. We keep a good eye on her. She's in that asylum up on the hill. We're watching her." And she's like, "Oh, okay."
Which I didn't really, whenever he was like, "Don't worry, we got her locked up tight," I was like, do you think she might want to come and get her? Like, I was just like, well, I'm just like, because, you know, like, she just
like
killed Benjamin. I was like, it's not like she's going to come down and, like, try to kill Tig, too.
Right.
Anything.
So I feel like as we go on, we feel like the town just thinks she's this cold-blooded murderer and will just kill anyone.
Yeah. It's like,
so he's like, "Don't worry, she's not going to get you.
She's an old lady. Like, just let her out."
just let her out.
Like, it's highly unlikely she's gonna kill again. So, but whatever.
So Tig goes back to Maze, and they're kind of just chit-chatting. She asks her how she makes soap, and she actually says she never remembers learning how to make soap. She just knew. And she says making soap is kind of like stories in that way. It gets passed down from one person to another along the way. We learned she was married, but he was an alcoholic, and he left town.
They weren't married for very long.
No. And then May starts taking an interest, like, what did you find and what's in this box? So she's looking in the box. She's looking at the articles. She says he was kind of a ladies' man. All the women loved him. The marriage certificate's in there. Shows she married Tig's grandmother, Valerie, when she was 19. And May says it's because the town believes she was in delicate condition. And she's like, that can't be possible because my dad was born 3 years later. So she's like, was she pregnant? How was she pregnant? What happened? The articles also talk about how Eloise lived with her Aunt Alma. I mean, they were both present at the night of Benjamin's murder, where they found his body in the woods, and he had been poisoned. And 6 days later, Eloise confessed to the murder. But then May reveals that they were actually really close, Benjamin and Eloise. They were inseparable, like childhood friends.
Mm-hmm.
And that this woman named Marjorie Thomas went missing as well. But when Tig asks her more about what happened, she shuts down, will not say anything else about it. She's like, I shouldn't have mentioned it. Forget about it.
Yeah, she says the air shifts in the room.
Yeah, like it's an uncomfortable situation. And she's like, I hope you're not mad at me. She's like, oh, I'm not mad.
Let's just not talk about it.
We're just not going to talk about it. And then after that, she says, the people around here know that great big statue much better than they knew Benjamin Costello. But the person that would know him best is his murderer.
Which is a great reason for her to go up there and talk to her.
Yeah. So chapter 4, we do just that. After she has a little bit of hiccup trying to get a car, she goes to the mayor and says, I need a car. And he's like, why?
Yeah.
And she's like, why do I have to give a reason?
Yeah.
But he's like, okay, I can get you something by like a few days. And she's like, why does it take a few days? Well, she finds out it's because he has to ask Jason to take her.
Yeah, May doesn't have a car.
Yeah, and she does notice, like, nobody in this town has a vehicle.
Yeah.
Everything's walking distant.
Yeah, I noticed that too. So that's kind of like, yeah, nobody really has a vehicle. So, like, no one's in this town.
Okay, so we've noticed there's no cars in this town. It doesn't seem like anybody's leaving. And so she actually goes, all right, thank you for lending me your truck. I'll take the keys now. He's like, yeah, that's not happening. I'm taking you where you gotta go. Where are we going? Are we going to the little museum on the square? And she's like, no, we're going to the asylum. He's like, oh, I'd rather not. But he caves and he takes her up there. So they're driving to this sanatorium called Dusty Hills. And this place is basically Waverly Hills Sanatorium in Louisville, Kentucky, from the way it's described, with large cement buildings stretching left to the right. There's gargoyles on the building. So if you don't know what Waverly Hills is, that was a sanatorium. So a bunch of tuberculosis patients were there. A ton of them died. Me and Hayden have actually been to Waverly Hills.
Spent the night. We did some ghost hunting. It's very creepy. Loved it.
So I definitely feel like the author pulled inspiration from them, from Louisville, Kentucky. Because she also says it was a tuberculosis ward.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's 5 stories, just like...
Yeah, I mean, they explain the sheer size of it is massive.
And
of course, Waverly Hills is massive.
You roll up on it and you're like, where...
It's all you can see.
You can't see it all.
Yeah.
From your left and right. And that's basically what she's like. It just stretches as far as I can see.
Mm-hmm.
It's massive. If you're a ghost hunter, encourage you to go. We heard things.
We saw things.
We saw things. We can't explain. Anyway.
Back to the story.
I would love to talk about that more, but we can't. So moving on. So Tig gets in there. She meets Eloise. And she's like, Eloise is kind of standoffish, not saying anything really at first. So she tries to instigate by asking about the statue and saying how much the townspeople love this man and all the great things he did. And she's like, he's a fool and a coward. So she definitely doesn't think there should be a statue of this man.
Mm-hmm.
Then Eloise is really weird at this part because Eloise is trying to find out information about Tig. And she's like, what's your favorite flower? And Tig says sunflower, and Eloise goes, you sure about that? And then they're talking about lilies of the valley. And Tig goes, oh, I always love lilies. And Eloise says, yeah, I suppose you would. So, like, what is she assuming about her?
What does that mean?
Yeah. Like, what? You're making all these assumptions. Like, yeah, I know you would. Like, But Eloise says, lilies are the most beautiful and deadly, and they apparently kill more people than the bears and the wolves in the forest.
We find out that her favorite flower are
It's the Moonflowers. It's the title of the book.
Yeah, brought it around.
So Moonflowers, she goes on to explain, are flowers that only bloom at night. What was that? There was that show, Haunting of Bly Manor, that had moonflowers.
Oh, did it?
Yeah.
It's been a while since I watched it.
Yeah, because she was in that relationship with the gardener. And she was like, this is a moonflower, and it only blooms at night. So I was kind of familiar with that from that show.
Good show.
Yeah, it was good. It is not as... I didn't watch Hill House, but I've heard it's not as good as Hill House.
We watched Hill House, me and Olivia.
You and Olivia
Watch Hill House?
No.
She was working. I mean,
I
you
was
watched
working
it.
at the hotel late.
Yeah.
It was good.
In the dark.
It was so scary.
It was terrifying.
It was.
It's still
Holy crap.
one of the scariest things I've ever seen. For sure. One moment in particular, I about jumped out of my skin.
Yes. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
We did.
Yeah, because you were sitting on the couch and I was laying down in the love seat and I about fell off.
Anyways.
We'll save that for another time. We'll have a TV show special or something. In this moment as well, though, we do find out that Eloise still doesn't like Benjamin. They talk about how the statue is a waste.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, she thinks it's a waste of time to make a statue about this guy.
Yeah. Which we're going to find out why, or eventually.
Eventually we'll figure out why she has some disdain for him.
Yeah.
But going back to this whole, like, she's assuming things of Tig, like acting like she knows her or something. Tig gets caught on a splinter while she's sitting down, and it gets stuck in her palm. And Eloise goes, "Have you been hurt, Tig?" And she's like, I feel like she's not asking me about the splinter. I feel like she's asking me about something else. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like maybe she has like a sixth sense in a way, like maybe a little psychic or something. So Eloise agrees to tell her story on the condition that she brings her some red oak leaves for her to press into this book she carries around. And Tig is to report to her 2 days a week. And she will give her story. And, Tig was like, I was really hoping to, like, get this, like, what you knew about him. And she's like, I cannot just give you highlights of this. She says, this story has many tales, and all must be heard to get the full story. And perhaps the one story you're chasing is in a different book than the one you've been given.
Yeah, I like that line.
So Tig's like, okay, but we start today. And she's like, all right, that's fair. So then Eloise begins her story. And it starts off with a man named Richard Price.
This is where it gets so good.
It gets a little juicy here.
Oh my gosh.
Gets a little juicy. Richard Price appears basically kind of almost like in the middle of the night. To Whitmore Falls, which he purchased for a whopping $300.
Woo!
Big money.
This is a house.
And it says $300 and the gold watch on his wrist.
Okay. Well, still, I don't think it was that much. Yeah, this is like a building that has an east and a west wing. Like, this is a massive house.
Mm-hmm.
Must be nice.
Yeah. We find out he's a neuropsychologist. He studies the insane. And she says his job takes him from town to town, but he's actually kind of on the run from a scandal.
Mm-hmm.
Because apparently he gets involved with his young patients. And the most brutal one, I'll go ahead and say trigger warning here. Involved a young patient who was found in a shed, almost bleeding to death from a self-inflicted abortion. She survives, and she's sent to another asylum. But he arrives to his new home in Darren with a new young person dressed in white named Joan. And we learned that Joan was an orphan and she never spoke.
Diagnosed as insane.
Diagnosed as insane. Richard made her a garden because Joan loved flowers. But when he shows it to her, she just jumps in and covers herself in mud. And
she starts licking the dirt
she
from
like
her
sucks it off her
fingers.
fingers.
Yeah.
And it says, what's that line? Do you have it pulled up? There's like a little line at the end. It's like she's remarkable.
Oh, what a strange girl, Richard must have thought. What a strange and marvelous girl.
Marvelous. But then we flash forward a few. He's turned this into a really well-running asylum. He keeps the patients in this massive building in the West Wing. And Eloise makes the point, like, don't think these patients were neglected. They were really well cared for.
He was extremely attentive.
Yeah, and they offered them all kinds of, like, different therapies that other people wouldn't offer, like sensory therapies and all that good stuff. But the winter comes, everything's outside is dying. Joan starts to feel sick. Richard thinks, oh, it's because her flower garden's dead. She's depressed. But she's actually pregnant.
Shocker.
Ooh.
Richard.
I wonder how that
Yeah,
happened.
Richard.
You dog.
Well, it says no one was surprised when Joan
No one
became
was
pregnant.
No one at all.
Because
he had such a history of doing that with other patients.
and also he's like been grooming her, like buying her jewelry, expensive clothes, spending hours with her in her room and in the forest.
Yeah.
In the forest. So
You really groomed her as well, buying her gifts and everything like
right,
Yeah, that's what she just said.
that. Okay.
So next thing we know, Eloise is born, and Joan automatically hates her.
Yeah.
Will not like breastfeed her. The cook is like, hey, she took her first steps, and she's like, I don't give a shit. And she just kind of floats down the halls. She wants nothing to do with the child.
Also, I'm curious. I don't think it ever mentions that Joan speaks. Is she still silent this entire time?
I don't think it's mentioned.
Yeah.
I wondered if she like still was perpetually just silent.
Yeah, it doesn't. I don't think it mentions either. But like, if she's not like completely silent, then she's like very limited speech, I'd say.
So Richard just thinks this is postpartum depression. The baby blues is what he calls it.
Okay, well, we don't know if I'm assuming this wasn't really like a consensual thing.
Right.
So I was also thinking like she sees Eloise as kind of a quote unquote rape baby. So I don't know if she like has like, doesn't want her because of that, because to her it was like unconsensual.
I was also kind of like, because Richard has groomed her so well, like this baby's born and she's worried it's gonna like take attention away from her, because that's why Richard goes and he like spends all his time with her, buys her new things, buys her paint and like washes her hair and like honeysuckle and just like really pampers her, trying to make her feel better.
Yeah.
Not working.
Yeah, not working.
But it never made me think that, like, Joan actually liked Richard. Like, at all.
Right.
Actually.
Yeah. So I think it was one-sided, of course.
We don't know 100%.
Yeah, we don't know. Maybe we'll find out a little more later.
So, of course, Eloise grows up
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
in this sort of hospital setting.
Yeah. So Eloise had free reign of the house, except her father always told her she was not to explore the West Wing, which reminded me of Beauty and the Beast. What's in the West Wing? It's forbidden.
Mental patients.
But
yeah, the mental patients stay there.
But One day she's playing with her marbles and one rolls a little too far, and then she goes a little closer and she rolls it a little more until it goes under the door of one of the patients. And then it rolls back to her. She does this for a few days, but then she gets caught by her dad. So dad drags her up by her arms, takes her back to her room. And he's about to threaten her, like, if you ever do this again. But she gets up, looks him in the eyes, and you're like, you keep them locked up like animals.
Yes.
This place is no better than a prison, and we're all caged in here. And that's when Richard slaps her. But she doesn't cry.
Mm-hmm. Like, hell yeah, standing up to your dad at such a young age.
Yeah. She's tough.
Mm-hmm.
And then we abruptly switch to Eloise telling Tig about the only clear memory she has of her mother. It's her walking to the pond, putting rocks in her dress, and calmly walking into the pond to drown herself.
Yeah, so Joan drowns and dies.
Yes, and Eloise thinks about stopping her, but decides not to do it because she can see how free her mom looks in her face. And she's like, she's going to finally be free from it all. So she doesn't go get her dad, just lets it happen.
Mm-hmm.
And then that night, moonflowers bloomed. And so the next day, she went to pick up the petals. And she pressed them in her own book. Richard grieves Joan greatly.
Mm-hmm.
And the hall just goes under very quickly. He cuts his staff. He has to send the patients elsewhere. He burns all his journals and notes in a bonfire one night, but the next day he's disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
Locals wonder if he burned himself to death or he just skipped town, leaving his kid behind. The cook was the only staff remaining, and she sees Eloise sitting in her mom's old muddy dress on the front steps.
Mm-hmm.
And she thinks, what a strange girl. Yeah. So then we cut. We're at the bar with Jason. Tig is at the bar with Jason. And we find out that Tig has not been back to a bar since that incident in Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And we find out that she met a very good-looking, flirtatious man. Which it hasn't been connected that they're the same people, but I think we can assume.
Yeah.
There's a man at the end of the bar listening to their conversation. Tig goes on and asks Jason about Whitmore Halls and what he knows about it. And the missing woman they mentioned. But Jason goes, there's more than one woman missing.
Yeah.
And locals say that Eloise just killed them all and placed a curse on the town. Because they think she's a witch.
Mm-hmm.
Which he himself doesn't believe, he says. But the guy at the end of the bar overhears the conversation. He joins in. And we find out he was in the army. His name's Stan. We find out he was in the army with Benjamin. And then he says the women up at Whitmore Falls were always up to no good.
Mm-hmm.
And this started once Eloise's Aunt Alma came to town.
He says they're killing babies up there.
They're killing babies up there with their medicine and burying them in the woods. And Jason's like, there's not a bunch of babies buried in the woods. And he says, go ask your daddy.
Mm-hmm.
He'll tell you. He'll set you straight.
So we can kind of assume, I guess, that like women were going up there to like possibly have abortions and everything.
Possibly.
So that made me think, I'm just going off on a tangent, but since we know that like allegedly Valerie was pregnant when her and Ben got married, and she was like, well, that's too soon for my dad to be born. I almost have a feeling that she got an abortion.
Well, wait a minute.
Possibly.
May says the baby was born.
It was born.
Yeah, but that's all she says. It says baby was born. Life went on.
I don't remember her saying that it was born.
Yeah, it's very... Like, I went back because I kind of had the same thought, but she says, yeah, the baby was born and life just went on. So, and then Tig doesn't dig any further. And I'm like, what do you mean the baby was born?
We'll figure it out later.
Okay. It's another little secret. We'll find out later. So not only are the babies dying, being buried in the woods, women are going missing.
Yes, which they sort of speculate that the mothers are going missing along with the children.
Yeah, Stan speculates that something that goes wrong with the medicinal abortion. They bleed out, they die.
Yeah.
And Eloise and Alma bury them also with the babies in the woods. Okay, and then the next chapter, we meet Alma, who is Joan's sister. I'm guessing, right?
Alma was the wife of Richard's brother.
Yeah, same last name.
Alma Price.
Because it never said that Richard was actually married.
Mm-hmm.
That
Like, he had a kid with Joan, but they never actually got married.
I just kind of like assume that because when they come to the house, she's in this white dress. But and the townspeople are like, they saw this young lady in white.
Yeah.
They couldn't tell how young she was, but
yeah, it took me a second to figure it out too. I was like, okay, no, she was actually married to Richard's brother.
Gotcha.
And then,
that makes
he
sense.
ends up dying.
Okay, yeah. All right. So Alma comes to live at the hall with her son Charles. Like you said, her husband's dead. So she's going to make the best of it. She decides to make it homey. And she knows Eloise is there, but she never actively seeks her out. She's basically like, she will come out when she's ready. And after a few days of watching them both, Eloise does decide to come out.
After it takes a long time. She sort of coaxes her out slowly.
Yeah, so basically it starts because Alma is in her cellar sorting her herbs in a certain specific way. And she comes back the next day and they're all in disarray. And she writes a note saying, like, there's reason for this. Like, don't touch. And then Eloise writes back the same thing. And then the next day she's like, Alma's like, I can show you. And that's what ultimately brings her out. It's like she wants to know more.
She's interested in all the herbs.
In all the herbs. So she comes out, they have dinner. Basically, they kind of start their new lives together. She realizes she loves the attention Alma gives her because it's so different from what she got from her mother, which was zero attention. Alma starts to teach her about the herbs, even takes her to the apothecary, and explains purposes of certain herbs. But one day, Alma tries to go to the apothecary to purchase herbs of pennyroyal and colocynth. Eloise doesn't recognize them, but the Russian apothecary,
Erica.
Alma asks for them, and Erica's like, I don't have those. And then she's like, Alma's like, I am more than willing to pay more than asking price. And she's like, okay, I might have those. So they make a deal. She'll get those herbs from the apothecary for more than the asking price.
Which I intended to look up what they were actually used for.
Did too.
Because she looks at her like, you know what these are used for, right?
I'm pretty sure that's the medicinal abortion herbs.
Probably. But I never actually went back.
Are you looking it up?
I will. I will look it up.
Yeah, so she still doesn't know what those herbs are for. In current day, Eloise goes on to say that to Tig that she was fascinated by Charles, but was so mean to him because he was such a good boy.
I didn't like how Eloise treated Charles. It really bothered me.
Yeah.
She was straight up mean to him, and he did nothing.
But I feel like we find out it's kind of like a jealousy thing, because she wants Alma's attention, but Charles
didn't seek her attention, though. He wasn't stealing it from her.
No. But they're kids. They don't understand that.
Well, she's being a butthole and I don't like it. Not a fan. Leave that boy alone.
And then going back to that Sixth Sense thing, Eloise mentions how lonely she was after her mother's death and just talks about her mother's dying. And
Stopped it.
Tig was like, I know she's like trying to coax something out of me. So Tig says that she lost her mom, and Eloise hums like she already knows. So back to that whole, why does she act like she knows all this stuff about her? In the next chapter, we find out that Eloise loves pulling pranks on Charles. And some of them are very sad. Like she hides his toys.
Plays hide and seek.
Plays hot and cold with them.
Plays hide and seek, has him hide, and then she just goes about her day.
Looks for him. Never looks for him.
Tells Alma, oh, he's just in the house, wanted to be by himself. He's fine.
But that's why I think it's about the attention, because she's like, okay, I'll play hide and seek with you, but then went out into the herb garden to hang out with Alma.
But Charles is not seeking the attention.
I know that, but she's a child, so she's like, less competition in my way, the better.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a little bit of information.
Okay, about the pennyroyal and the Collison.
Yeah, so I couldn't really find anything that seemed very bad for Collisant. It just says kind of like laxatives and stuff. It can be used for that, anti-diabetic stuff. But the pennyroyal stuff, it does say that it's extremely toxic.
Okay.
So
if it's like a laxative, I would say that's to like contract the abdominal muscles to perform an abortion.
yeah.
I don't know. I'm not
I don't know.
or a midwife or an herbalist.
Yeah.
But that would be my guess.
Anyways.
Yeah, so she's mean to Charles, like very mean. And Charles is like, but I still love you though. Just follows her around. And he's like, that is a terrible trait to have. And then once every day she goes out to the garden and we meet Benjamin. He pops out from the woods and she's like, you're trespassing. And he's all cocky and he's like, my dad will own all this someday too. Mm-hmm. So what's the point?
Right.
And she's not impressed. But then he's like, you want to see a magic trick? And starts juggling like 2 apples. And she's like, that's nothing. Try 4. So he juggles. And she's like, okay, that was kind of impressive. And then he ruins it all by saying, is it true that your dad murdered your mom?
Yeah.
And it pissed her off so much. She's like, if you think those apples are delicious, let me show you these berries because you're going to love them. Mm-hmm. And she calls them berries. And he's like, man, these are delicious. And they're poison. Yep. So he's like, oh, my stomach hurts.
Yeah, he's immediately sick.
Yeah, he said, she's like, you'll get sick, but you won't die.
Yeah, and that sort of like prefaces the story as well. While she's talking to Tig, he's like, how'd y'all first meet? She said, oh, I tried to kill him.
Yeah.
Poisoned him.
And then she's like,
funny enough, he dies of poison later.
Right. And this chapter ends when she's running away and she says, you'll be shitting for days. Yeah. Love. It's so good.
But sure enough,
he comes back 3 days later.
3 days later, just hanging out on the front porch, tossing an apple.
And they're inseparable from that point on. And Charles grows to love Benjamin as well. Kind of learns how to be a man from Benjamin. Mm-hmm. And then she says, well, you know, Tig, Benjamin actually saved me once. Mm-hmm. Or at least tried to save me once.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So she gets bit by a snake, poisonous snake.
Cottonmouth.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of the worst things you can be bitten by, especially here in the state of Kentucky. They're everywhere. Pretty deadly if you're out in the woods. So don't do that.
So Benjamin's like, I'm going to save the day. He takes a knife, goes into the wound enough where he can put his teeth on it and start sucking out the venom. So he's sucking out venom and blood. He does this like 6 times and he's like, all right, that should be good. So they're like trudging back up to the house. Alma is like, that's not going to do anything. Yeah. He tried though. He tried his hardest. Yeah. But she's like, that's not going to do anything. And then like, she's like, a few days later, they were back playing again. Yeah. So then, while this is happening, again, another flashback, Tig remembers an art gallery where a random woman comes up and compliments her painting of the woman in the woods.
Yeah, a woman dressed in yellow.
Yeah, she's wearing a yellow coat, I think. The woman seems familiar to her. And then she mentions she knows those trees, and those are red oak tree leaves. So that's interesting. And she says bye to Tig, and Tig never asked what her name was, so we don't know who that was.
Yeah, I was trying to rattle my brain, try to figure out who it was, but there's just no information yet on who it might be.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, though. I'm very, very curious about who it might be.
Yeah, so we got all these little side stories, side memories that are eventually, I'm sure, all going to connect together, and we're going to find out a bunch of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But Tig asks Alma, like, so what did you do in the winter when everything died? Like, what happened to the herbs? And we find out the apothecary closed down, and she pretty much cleaned out the stock. So she was well ready for her business. And Tig's like, what was her business? She was a midwife.
Mm-hmm.
Of course.
Yeah. So, not a witch. Alma was a midwife. Eloise says that they did all kinds of things, not just... I mean, she hasn't said they've done abortions or anything yet, but she's like, we did contraceptions, provided lubrications, helped with rashes, headache medicine,
Ointments.
Did a lot of things. But it didn't matter what they were coming for. Every woman came covering their face with a scarf, afraid of the scandal, afraid of their husbands finding out. So Tig explains that people in the town think the women that visited the hall were murdered. And Eloise calmly goes, no women are murdered in this story.
Mm-hmm.
And Tig begs for more information, but Eloise says she has one more story today. And this is where things are going to start to change.
Yeah.
So that's the end of chapter 9. The perfect ending for chapter 9.
It literally says, here's where things begin to change.
Here's where things start to change.
And that's right where we had to stop. And I want to keep reading, but we didn't. Of course.
Also, we didn't mention this, but the first time, Eloise is like, all right, I'll tell you the story, like, as long as you bring me leaves from the red oak tree.
Yeah.
Oh,
First time she brings her leaves,
a lot of them get thrown out.
She goes through them, and the majority, she's like, oh, these are shit.
This one's too wet. This one's too dry. This one's not the right color. Get this shit out of here.
And I just love that. I was like, oh my gosh. But it said, like, Tig just, like, picked them up from around town.
Yeah.
So just like,
she
okay,
didn't
go
go
out.
out.
She wasn't even trying.
See, when I
anyway,
thought
so...
this, she's like, one condition, go find these leaves. I thought they were going to be incredibly rare to find.
Specifically oak trees.
Yeah.
She has to go out into the forest and find them. But she's like, I picked them up from around the bar.
Yeah.
There are oak trees everywhere.
It's like, these are supposed to be oak trees.
Specifically oak trees.
Specifically oak trees.
No other tree. She's like, no birch.
No poplar, no birch.
No pine.
Oak or nothing.
Nothing.
But
I love that part.
So that was the first 9 chapters. Any thoughts, wishes, concerns?
So far, I don't like Eloise. Not a fan.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Is it just because she's mean to Charles?
Part of it.
Okay. I like her.
I think she's funny.
I'm gonna say it right now. I think Benjamin was a murderer.
Really?
I think he's gonna be the cause of these women going missing.
So what's his motive?
I don't know. He was probably like a sexual deviant or something.
Oh.
Wow.
That's what I'm thinking. I'm going all the way out.
Yeah.
I'm
I didn't
going
go that
all
way.
the way out.
That is not the
could
path I
be.
went down.
That would be crazy.
Yeah.
There's just something about Alma and Eloise that I don't like. I do feel like they're up to something. I don't think they're innocent at all.
So if that would be good, because if that's the case, Eloise would be the hero of the story for
Exactly.
taking Benjamin out.
Yeah.
A part of me
And
feels
possibly freeing, what's her name? Her grandmother, Tig's grandmother.
Valerie.
Yeah, 'cause she found out she's pregnant. And
That is true. A
But-
part of me feels like, though, I don't know. I feel like we're being led to believe that Eloise is somewhat crazy because her mother was. And I'm sort of feeling that, you know?
yeah.
We're being led that way, of course, with the writing, but I do kind of feel that way. That there is something wrong with her.
Which I. So if that's the case, I kind of hope it's not, because I think this is all going to connect back to sexual assault,
Of course. Yeah.
and it would be
That's why I
bad that
feel
the
like-
mom is crazy, so you're crazy if anything happened to you.
Yeah, that's why I just feel like Benjamin is going to be at the heart of all of this, because we can already kind of see it to where like he was a private person, like people don't really know him.
That's
and
true.
He never
Kept to
really
himself.
know anyone.
It's all just from stories. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true.
That
You're
he was
probably
such
onto
a
something.
good guy. So, but then like, because like after they find him dead and everything, like Eloise does confess.
But it's
And
6 days
everything.
later. Why for the
A couple
wait?
days later.
6 days specifically. Why the wait?
I don't know.
What was she doing the 6
I
days?
don't know. So, yeah, I don't know.
Maybe she.
So
was,
it's either she's like she actually did it to be and just didn't like tell anyone like what was actually happening, and like he was behind like all these women going missing, or she did it to like take the blame off of someone else that we just haven't heard of yet. I don't know.
Also, I don't know if I'm remembering this correct. In the first part of the book, when she's describing him being poisoned, he's like sitting at a table drinking tea,
Yeah.
and they find him in the woods.
Yeah.
So I wonder what happened.
Where it all began.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah, I'm excited to read more.
Oh.
Hope all of you listeners enjoyed those first few chapters.
Yeah. All right,
Yeah.
chapters 10 through 18 for next week.
And if you're an overachiever, you've already read 10. So
Yeah, so page 107 through page 200 is what we'll be reading.
all right, that sounds good.
Roughly 100 pages is what we strive for. On to the next.
Hey,
Shall we start with some literary news, or should we start with
what we
stories
read
of dreams?
this week?
We can start with what we read this week.
Yeah.
Olivia, why don't you start?
All right. So I know a few weeks ago I've said I was going to read What Moves the Dead by T. Kingfisher. So that's what I read
Ooh.
this week. So just to go back, it's basically a modern reworking of Edgar Allan Poe's Fall of the House of Usher. And it was really good. I'm probably not going to talk too much about
You
it
don't
because I
spoil
don't really want to spoil it. Like, it's just, so like, if you like Edgar Allan Poe, I would recommend it because
Okay.
she just like adds a lot more detail and everything.
I do like Poe.
Yeah.
I'll probably read it.
So I will talk a little bit about it. So we have the Ushers and another nameless author. And it doesn't really like come out and say it, but I think it's actually a girl this time because there's just like references to different things that make me think it's a girl. They talk about like she's a warrior or something, and it talks about like binding the breast. So I was just like, so I think you're a girl. And then there's like another like woman that comes into play, and she's kind of like talking to her about like a lot of different stuff. So I think it's actually a girl narrator instead of a guy. So Madeline is sick and everything,
Mhm.
and like the regular story. And there's weird stuff going on with the house, which is all decrepit. And like, no wonder they're all sick, because one scene is the narrator goes into the library and literally all the books in the library are covered with mold. It's like, yeah, like all of the books and like the wallpaper. I'm just like, yeah, no wonder everyone's sick. You like haven't cleaned out all these books. And there's also something going on with some of the animals around the house. So they talk about these hares that are acting very peculiar. And they find out that there's this certain fungus that may be the cause of the problem and why everyone is acting weird and like getting sick.
Oh.
So, like I said, it's really cool. Instead of the house collapsing at the end, it catches on fire.
Okay. So like in the original, we're just kind of like left to believe everybody's gone crazy in the house. Sure.
Yeah.
But this one gives you actual like it could be fungal, it could be bacterial.
It's pretty it's pretty specific on like what actually like is happening. So
it's the mold. Yes. No.
I won't say.
She's not gonna
Oh, okay. She won't say.
It's just a cool like reworking of the story, I think. Like she puts a lot of like new details into it. Besides the original story where it's just like, oh, Madeline is sick, she dies, and then she comes back because she may or may not have actually been dead because she has catalepsy and everything, which gives the impression of someone being dead.
Right.
So it's like a lot more, and there's like a mystery like to it, and like it like the ending is like very supernatural to kind of like sci-fi. So it's just like it's a little bit weird whenever it mentions it, but it's just like it is like it's basically like a like supernatural like sci-fi like ending to the story, and I just thought it was I thought it was kind of cool.
Sci-fi, automatically aliens.
Yeah. So highly recommend if you're a Poe fanatic and like the dark gothic supernatural story. And she actually has a second story that's supposed to be a sequel called What Feasts at Night that actually it came out at the beginning of this year. Which I don't think that's supposed to be about any particular like Poe piece or anything. So, but honestly, the way What Moves the Dead ends is how The Fall of the House of Usher ends. So I feel like honestly, it's like a really good just like standalone book. So like I might read the What Feasts at Night, the second book, but I mean, I don't think that you like have to. Like the first book is basically like it ends and it's just like.
So are these like short little novellas or are they like actual?
I think it's pretty short and everything. I feel like. So the last page on like my Kindle is page 157.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
It's pretty short.
So I did finally read a little bit of The Education of Little Tree.
So proud.
Not too much of it, but I did start it. Thank you for being proud of me. And essentially it starts with this boy who has to go live with his grandparents because the very beginning of the book, he has a parent that passes away and the other parent, being grief-stricken, ends up passing away as well fairly soon after. So this 5-year-old boy who has to live with his grandmother and grandfather, and they are people who basically just live in the woods, got a bunch of dogs, and he starts to learn some lessons from his grandfather as they go out on a morning hunt where they start to sort of place a hole in the ground to track turkeys. And they get this view of this beautiful sunrise over this hollow. And they get to experience a bit of nice life together at the very beginning. And that's sort of where I'm at. I just started it. I wanted to read at least a little bit of it before we got onto the podcast. But I'm looking forward.
We've been waiting so long.
I know, and I apologize. I've still not read a lot. But, first couple chapters were a little slow. And he's just starting to learn what his life is going to be like with his grandparents.
Okay. I read nothing except for the book.
You were busy on vacation.
I was on vacation.
That's fine.
I could not do it. All right. So that's all we read this week.
Yep.
I think next we should talk about dreams.
Let's do dreams.
Andrea last week shared a crazy dream. And this week it is Olivia's turn because apparently she had a crazy dream last night.
I had a crazy dream last night, and it's actually fairly normal. up until the very end. I feel like y'all will like gasp.
Oh, okay.
Like I could gasp. I hope you do. For some reason, Zach and I were getting married again, but it was more traditional service at my old church that I used to go to whenever I was younger. I guess there were people who couldn't come to the wedding the first time. The whole thing was a disaster.
Oh no.
Something was wrong with the food. Like maybe we didn't even have any. It was also super late at night. I was having trouble with getting ready for the service, and I was sitting in the pews trying to put on my jewelry, but I couldn't get my earrings in, and I almost lost them in the pews. Gina, which was one of my bridesmaids, had to help me put them in. Then, I didn't like my necklace. It was a really long, like, black leather looking thing with fringes at the end.
Ew.
No, I had to wear because I didn't have anything else. I remember just being so rushed, and I looked down, and my dress isn't white, but it's this slick black dress.
Mm-hmm.
We go out and around the front doors of the service space because apparently I'm supposed to come in from the other side and cross over the stage. And on the way out, I see Zach's back. He's standing out there. So I have to hide my face so he won't see me. Which doesn't make any sense because we're already married. So the bridal party walks in, and then me. I'm standing across from Zach, but it just feels wrong. He's taken his jacket off, and his eyes are just glazed over, and he's swaying a bit. Someone got him completely sloshed. And maybe on drugs too, because he starts just acting crazy and crawling on the floor. And he starts saying very vulgar things just out loud and to me. It's the most embarrassing thing. Everyone is looking at us and me with just like pity in their eyes. And I specifically remember I make eye contact with Rachel, who was our photographer. And she's just like so sad, just looking at me. So, and then we try to start the service. And my parents come over and give me something to drink from these little like the little beakers that you like have in like science class and everything. So they give some to me, and I have to drink like 3 of these beakers that are like full of some liquid. And they try to give some to Zach, but he's off just acting crazy. Then it's just like the atmosphere changes, and there's a wind that picks up inside the church, and you know that it's building to something because in my dream, just this dramatic music just starts, just like a da-da, da-da-da, da-da-da. And the wind is picking up, and my dress and veil are flying. People are embarrassed themselves and leaving, and I guess the church is decrepit, so one of the pews collapses. So after I drink the contents of the vial, my parents say, the bride and groom are now divorced. I told you would gasp. And part of me is like, what? No. But I'm also so embarrassed by how Zach is acting that I don't really know what to say. And my dad goes, do you know who they are? And he points to Zach's parents. Did you know that they supported the people who built those planes?
What?
I don't know.
My mind immediately went to 9/11.
Too, I was like, what?
What
I think the
planes?
burgers did 9/11.
The burgers were responsible for 9/11? Jerry?
I don't think, I mean, it wasn't 9/11, but they supported some people with some planes. Who built some planes, and I guess there was like something went deeper within these people who built these planes for something. And I want to know how my parents know. Like, it's a conspiracy.
Why is it crawling on the ground?
I don't know. Like, he was like drugged.
What were do you know the vulgar things he was saying?
I don't remember exactly. But he was just acting like a crazy, like, drunk person, basically. Oh my god.
So in the dream, you knew you had already been married.
Yeah, we were,
and then you were
this
doing
was
this whole other
this was supposed to be a second wedding ceremony for, I guess, some people who like weren't able to come to our original wedding. But it was
Plot twist, it was a divorce ceremony.
It was a divorce ceremony all the time,
Wow.
put together by my parents.
That's a crazy dream.
The creepy part is, don't you know who they are?
I know.
That was super. I was like, who? Oh my god, who?
I know.
Who's there?
I know. No, it was just the burger. Just the burger.
Just the fact.
Jerry's just like, hi.
The in-laws.
Just the in-laws. Which, I mean, my parents love Zach's parents, so it's highly unlikely that would happen. But it's just so funny.
So were Hayden and I at this wedding?
Yeah, y'all were all there. I mean, I don't remember.
You
Like,
did not control your. You didn't do your best man job.
I mean, I definitely remember, like, all of you guys, like, my bridesmaids. I don't really remember, I think, because I remember, like, walking out of, like, because there's, like, the church where I grew up in and everything. There's, like, 2 doors on either side that, like, lead to the main chapel.
Right.
So I was, like, walking through the one where all the groomsmen were lined up. And I remember, like, seeing the back of, like, Julian, because I remember his curly hair and everything. But I don't really remember, like, all of y'all. But I do remember you guys, because I was, like, staring at you guys.
Were we just like
Just like,
horrified?
what is happening? Yeah, like, what is happening? Everyone was just like, what the hell is happening?
You know, wouldn't that be something? I wonder if divorce rate would go down if you were
Had to have a whole
required to have a
ceremony.
divorce ceremony. It's never crossed my mind. Wow.
But I just love how it's like this wind, like, if there's a change, the wind picked up, like, inside the church. And
All of a sudden, there's like video game boss music.
also, yeah, the music. It's just like, just like, yeah, that was like, man, drama.
Wow, what a dream!
I know.
That's good.
I feel like,
Which I told Zach, and he was like, wow, it's a good thing you didn't have that the night before our wedding.
oh my god,
That would have been funny.
I haven't had a dream in a while. At least none that I remember. I really want one now, but I want it to be a good one.
That's a good one.
I haven't had a nightmare in a long time, and I don't want one anymore.
Yeah.
Curious, what did you eat the night before you dreamt? Do you remember?
Last night?
Oh, that was this. This is this.
Yeah, I literally had the dream last night. So, I mean, we had pizza.
You have weird dreams on pizza sometimes.
I think the combination is pizza and Sunkiss.
Yes, you did have weird dreams that night. And heartburn.
The problem is I'll have heartburn and then I wake up in the middle of the dream and I don't remember anything. So, foiled by heartburn.
But yeah, that was my crazy dream.
Wow.
That was good.
That was a great dream.
Thanks.
That was
It
good.
had all the elements.
It really
I
did.
was intrigued.
There was a bit of suspense. Yeah, I got scared at one moment. I was like, who are they? That's very ominous for your dad to say that. Do you know them?
Yeah. I thought the most ominous
Calm
part,
down, Jeff.
the most ominous part, like, whenever I was having the dream, was after I drank the contents of the vial, my parents say the bride and groom are now divorced. I was just like, what? It's like, what is happening?
Yeah, the way you described it is so ominous and creepy.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Good storytelling.
For a brief moment, I thought it was going to take a totally different turn. And when you were like, when the wind started picking up and stuff like that, I was like, is Ryzen about to come in? Like, steal you away?
Ooh. I mean, yes, please. I'll be taken to the night court.
Oh, is this that fairy boat?
Yeah.
Because he interrupts a wedding.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I didn't even think about that. And I was wearing black.
Yes.
Oh man. Can I have this? Can I change this?
Quick change.
Okay.
Quick change. In the first book, who is she with?
Tamlin.
Okay. So I think I saw a TikTok recently where this girl got a tattoo of
She
Tamlin.
did.
And everyone
She
was
read
like,
the
she's
first
not,
book
she's
and
not read
got a
book 2
tattoo.
yet. She's going to regret that tattoo.
No.
So she's hoping Maas is going to redeem Tamlin in some way, so her tattoo will be okay.
Girl, get that covered.
All right.
All right.
Anything else before we move on to the next?
No, I don't have any dreams.
All right. I think we move on to literary news.
Yeah. So, which I try to pick stuff that's happened within the past like month or so.
Okay.
So, in October, an amateur historian has discovered a long lost short story by Bram Stoker,
Oh.
published just 7 years before his legendary Gothic novel Dracula.
Ooh.
And this came from the BBC website.
Oh.
So Brian Cleary stumbled upon the 134-year-old ghostly tale while browsing the archives of the National Library of Ireland. The story, called Gibbet Hill, was originally published in a Dublin newspaper in 1890, when Bram Stoker started working on Dracula, but has been undocumented ever since. The ghostly story tells the tale of a sailor murdered by 3 criminals whose bodies were strung up on a hanging gallows as a warning to passing travelers.
Mm-hmm.
And they just published it at the end of October.
Oh.
So I'm gonna have to read it.
Yeah.
So I just think, and that's all it says about what the story's about and everything. But it's just crazy that literally no one knew this piece existed.
Years later.
Even among Stoker scholars and biographers, he just stumbled upon this in the library because he was a Bram Stoker I wouldn't say expert, but he studied Bram Stoker a lot.
A file.
Yeah. So he just stumbled upon it in the library and was like, I don't remember this piece under Bram Stoker, but his name is on it. And it just turns out to be a legit Bram Stoker piece.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So that's my news.
Yeah, that's very cool.
And you said it takes place on a ship? Where murder happens?
No, it said that there was a sailor
Okay.
was murdered by 3 criminals, but then their bodies were strung up on a gallows as a warning.
Okay.
And that's all it said about what it was
Gotcha.
about. So.
You mentioning the sailor made me think of ship.
Yeah.
Which that is a good setting for something to happen.
Yeah. Which I'm hoping I said the name of it right. It's called, I pronounced it Gibbet Hill, and it's spelled Gibbet, but I don't know. So I'm just I don't really know how you would actually pronounce that, but Gibbet.
Anything else before we end our podcast today?
I think we're good.
Covered everything?
So we'll do the spiel. Follow us on Instagram.
Did we have any shout outs this time?
No shout outs. Guys, reach out to us so we can shout you out.
We can even share your short stories.
Yeah, we'll share your short stories.
We want to be your friend.
Yeah. If it's
That's not creepy at all.
If it's some really smut, you can just I want people to know about it, but I want to see what they think about it first.
We are willing. We are absolutely willing to read your short stories anonymously if there's just something you've written.
Yeah, anything.
Mm-hmm.
Send those to us. You can send those to us at onelitpod@gmail.com. onelitpod@gmail.com. You can follow us on TikTok and Instagram. And you can stream this podcast via Spotify or YouTube. We upload it to both platforms. All right.
We'll see you next week.
See you next week.
Read your chapters.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.